When you're talking about morality, though, when you really reverse engineer it and you get it down to its root, you're a psychologist. Yeah. It really seems like it just has to deal with motivation. People are saying there is a God.
It's more specific than that.
Well, so let me ask you this. So if there is a God and there is a moral code and it doesn't come at your benefit, are you going to follow it?
It depends on how you define your benefit.
Oh my God. Why does it matter? Why does it matter what you define? What mean a good thing for you? This is a place where benefit doesn't matter. The definition of benefit doesn't matter. It's not going to change if you mean, oh, it is this particular version of good thing for you. This is coming down to divine command theory. If God asks you to do something that you determine is not in your benefit, would you do it? And of course you would.
If it's going to come at your expense, would you still follow it? If God came down and said, here is my moral code and you should follow it, but
again, another claim from Maverick said, for humans to have inherent purpose, it must come from a source outside of us. Okay, I am willing to accept your claims. This is now claim number 3. I understand what you believe. I'm asking why.
Even if you follow it, you are still going to end up in hell. Are you going to follow it?
Ooh, that's a good question. Back that.
They'll follow it. If God came down and said, here is my moral code and you should follow it, but even if you follow it, you are still going to end up in hell. Are you going to follow it?
Put a 1 in the chat if you would still follow it. God says you have to do this, but it will land you in hell if you actually do it. But you have to do it. I'm God. Are you going to do that? A logical answer. A logical answer here. And if you say 1, then maybe you need to take a look in the mirror about what you believe and where that is going to get you in life.
Well, that was the question that was put to Job and to Christ.
And that was the story that fucking blew my mind and it made me for sure that I could not believe in Christianity, that a God would do to a human or a believer what God did to Job is basically for a bet because he was being petty with Satan. Nah.
Going to follow it.
Well, that was the question.
How is it a false? Whoa. How is it a false dichotomy? Because yeah, he would if it was, but it's not. False dichotomy is offering 2 choices when there's more than 2 choices. Are you going to do it or are you not going to do it? What's the third option? There's no third option. Either you do it or you don't do it. There's no in between of doing it or not doing it. So it's not a false dichotomy. Eric said, if I could define my benefit as harming others and hoarding wealth if morality isn't objective. Okay, but then we would be like, okay, that's not how people use it. So you could, but then you'd just be talking nonsense. I could call this a microphone. I could call this a flat top griddle. You could do whatever the fuck you want, but if I want people to understand what the fuck I'm talking about, then I need to call this a phone. I need to call this a vape.
That was put to Job and to Christ, right? Because they were required. Hang on, I'm answering your question. They were required to withstand trials that would break anyone and maintain their upward orientation regardless.
And they did that with the motivation of believing that this omnipotent, all-loving God would somehow turn it into a benefit. So they still did it solely for their benefit. So
let's define benefit.
Richard says, as a Christian, you have to do what God says. But God says you're going to hell if you do what he says. Tell me how that's not a false dichotomy, because there's only 2 options. Either you do it or you don't do it. For it to be a false dichotomy, you need to offer the third option. Give me the third option, and I'll be like, oh, Richard, you're right. I was wrong. That is a false dichotomy. And yeah, it is a weird hypothetical, but it's logically consistent. What is the third option? So I'm going to start this one. So we're waiting on Maverick to determine how he knows purpose cannot be found outside of God. And we're waiting to determine how Richard, what the third option is that makes this a false dichotomy.
Solely for their benefit. So
let's define, hang on. Let's define benefit. Like if I did something for your sister, would that be to your benefit? Like, how are you defining your benefit? Do you mean one of your whims gratified now? Or do you mean you and everyone you love and know over some reasonable span of time?
So
what do you mean by you?
When you're talking about whims, I think you're talking about something that's more dopamine. When you're talking about morality, you're talking about something that's more serotonin and more ultimately satisfying. So you and I agree on a lot. I mean, when it comes to talking about how men should be masculine and things of that nature, you and I are 100% in agreement. We just don't agree on the justification that God is the only thing that provides morality.
It's not a justification.
Oh, honey, sweetie baby. Oh, honey, sweetie baby. Why did you do this to yourself? Why would you do this to yourself? A false dichotomy, a logical fallacy where an argument presents only two options as if they are the only possibilities when in reality there are more options available. So yet again, I ask you, what are the other options available? Do it or don't do it. And third option is... what is the third option? I will say, Richard, I was wrong. You were right. Just give me the third option. That's all I'm asking you. Shout out to Tim Forrester in the building. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the party. Dr. Peterson represents himself, not Christianity. I mean, tell him that. Tell him that. Have you heard the good news about masculinity? Love it. Love it. Good one, good one, good one. Welcome to the party. We also got Adam Hansen in the building. Said Jordan Peterson is an actual Christian. He's not a fake Christian like the Trinity insanity. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. We have a lot of different opinions. So let's see how that all comes together. Since you only go to hell if you don't listen to God is the scenario he presents. Do we agree? If you go to hell only if you don't listen to God. No, nobody said only. Well, if you don't listen to God, you may or may not go to hell because you may be fit the parameters. But we're saying he's commanding you to do a thing. And he's saying, you do this thing, except that I will send you to hell for doing it. Now, you might argue God wouldn't do that, but that's an entirely different conversation. That's why it's a hypothetical. Hypothetically, you can either do it or not do it. You said it's a false dichotomy, which means there are other options available. What is the other option that is available? Just give me the option. What is the option? Do it or don't do it. And what's the third option? Just give me the third option.
It's the definition.
What's the difference then between a definition and a justification? I mean, it's ultimately psychologically the same thing.
Well, we have to define what we're talking about before we can just debate.
Okay, well,
right?
so here's my
I
position.
said that God, among other things.
I'm actually a non-theist. I'm not an atheist. I believe the human condition is one of uncertainty. And what that means is that I don't believe.
Okay, we've got another claim here. Clearly, you're not going to hell if you listen to God. Okay. And that is based on God can't change his mind. We're all talking about, how the slavery argument is stupid because God can, have things different at different times. So what's clear about it?
Actually a non-theist. I'm not an atheist. I believe the human condition is one of uncertainty. And what that means is that I don't believe that you can conclude there is a God with certainty. And I don't believe that you can conclude that there is a God without in the same position. Now, with that, I don't care. I still wake up every day and I have motivation to be a moral person.
Define moral.
Moral, what I ought to do.
Okay, and how do you...
Yes, Richard. Yes, Richard. The premise is God is trying to set you up for failure. Will you do it? Yes or no? That's the question. Correct.